Welcome to Faithful Doubt. My name is Jordan, and today we're going to talk about divorce. Today's question, is divorce allowed in the Bible? Before we begin, this is a very serious topic, and I want to take it seriously, and I just want to start out by saying divorce obviously affects so many people, I want to just let everyone know that I sympathize, and I can't imagine how painful going through a divorce is. So I just want to say, if anyone's going through a divorce right now, I'm very sorry that you're going through that, and that must be extremely painful. And I don't want to treat that lightly. That pain is not something to treat lightly. So as we're going through this episode today, just want to keep that in mind, how serious divorce really is and the kind of pain that comes along with it. But with that pain, just because I've never experienced divorce and my parents haven't been divorced, it doesn't mean that I haven't experienced a similar pain, in that we all share family conflict and pain in our life. It's the one thing that kind of unites all people. There isn't a single person on this earth that hasn't had some kind of conflict or pain in their family. And so we've all endured that. But the problem with divorce is this, at least in Christianity, is that a lot of Christians, if not most, have the wrong response when it comes to divorce. It is often a response of judgment and not compassion. And that is not the correct response to have as a Christian. We should be completely compassionate and try our best to understand what someone is going through, not immediately judging someone over divorce or condemning people. That is not what we're called to do. So, again, we all have conflict and share conflict within our families, and we all have to endure conflict. So how are people built differently to handle conflict? Because no two people really handle conflict the same way. And we may have similar tendencies in how we handle conflict, such as there are people who they don't want to deal with conflict whatsoever, and they just want to kind of move past it and ignore what happened. If you're like me, the way I get through conflict is I want to kind of exist in the pain. I want to sulk. I want to think over and over about the pain and what happened in the conflict. And so that's kind of how I get through conflict. There's people who immediately want resolution in conflict. There's people who are very loud and get very animated when there's conflict. So we all deal with conflict in different ways. And really, divorce comes from conflict within marriage, right? And so here with divorce, how many people go through divorce? Well, statistically, about 50% of all marriages in the U.S. end in divorce. I think you've probably heard that statistic before. But what the more surprising statistic is that at least that amount, if not a little more, of all Christian marriages end in divorce. So if divorce is such a big deal in the faith, in the Christian faith, and if Christians really want to say that divorce isn't allowed, it's sinful, it's wrong, why are so many Christian marriages ending in divorce? And it either kind of boils down to, well, a lot of those people who are saying they're Christians aren't really Christians, or it kind of boils down to Christians are just as sinful as everyone else, and we're just as broken, and we deal with conflict and pain in the same way as everyone else in our marriage. But more importantly, what does Jesus say about divorce? And to know what Jesus says, we need to go to the book of Matthew, specifically chapter 19 in the Bible. And so I'm going to read that real quick for us, verses 3 through 9. It says this: Some Pharisees came to him to test him. They asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason?" "Haven't you read," Jesus replies, "that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, 'For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate. Why then, they asked, did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away? And Jesus replies, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for marital unfaithfulness, and marries another woman commits adultery. Those are some heavy words by Jesus. What is he saying there? What's kind of going on in this passage is this. The Pharisees cannot stand Jesus. They don't agree with what he's teaching. They don't agree that he's the Son of God. They actually find that to be blasphemy for a man to say he's the Son of God. And so they're actually trying to trap Jesus in his words in this passage. They want Jesus to take a hard stance on divorce that most Jews it was not popular amongst most Jews, which is this. There is no excuse for divorce unless it is sexual immorality in the marriage. They want Jesus to take that stance because there was kind of two schools of thought amongst the Jews, and it was the way they interpreted it wasn't necessarily sexual immorality, it was unfaithfulness, right? Like, how do we interpret what unfaithfulness means in a marriage? And so there was two schools of thought amongst the Jews. The one school said, which was the more conservative of the two schools, what said any sexual immorality, meaning anytime the wife sleeps with another man, that is permissible to divorce. The other school of thought, which was the more popular and liberal point of view, said anytime a woman did something that a man didn't like, such as she wasn't good at cooking, maybe she didn't dress the way you liked, and I'm not making this up. We actually have a written record of the Pharisee of this school of thought saying it was permitted to divorce your wife if you didn't like her cooking. There's like that liberal school of thought, which was if your wife did anything you didn't like, it was okay to divorce her. And you know what? You look at our culture today, that's kind of what we hold to now. If you just don't think things are going the way you want them to go in your marriage, if you've fallen out of love, or it's not the right person, or your significant other is not who you thought they were, then it's okay to divorce, right? Like, that's a perfectly allowed legal reason to divorce someone in our culture. And so those two schools of thought exist amongst the Jews, and they're wanting Jesus to take the more conservative stance on marriage because it's a little less popular than the liberal stance on divorce and marriage. And what Jesus is saying is he doesn't take the conservative stance. He actually goes like beyond that, and he says, no, actually, Moses allowed for divorce because your hearts were hard. And so what is Jesus really saying here? He's saying, when Jesus answers the Pharisees, when they're trying to trap him, he always does this thing where he kind of goes back in time to what God said in the beginning. Like Jesus, if you notice, Jesus is always going to point to God the Father because he submits to the authority of God the Father in heaven. And so he starts out by saying, no, actually in the beginning, God created marriage between a man and a woman, and you were supposed to be united in one flesh and never separate and be divorced. But because your hearts were hardened towards God and towards one another, he concedes and allows you to divorce in order that we have peace in a society of many people that have different levels of maturity in their faith. So this allowance for divorce, as Jesus said, wasn't a command. The command was you can marry to a man and a woman can be married and united in one flesh and don't ever divorce. That's the command. Jesus says this is a concession that God gives you due to your fallen and sinful state. So allowing someone to divorce over sexual immorality, unfaithfulness, is a concession. Now, this might lead you to go, well, wait a second, Jordan. What about abuse? And that's a very, very serious situation, obviously. And if you are in an abusive relationship or marriage, first things first, I think it's important you get out of that. You get as far away from that situation as possible. You get yourself safe, as well as if you have kids. I would never recommend you not doing that. But we kind of believe that there's three kind of reasons why Christians believe you can divorce. And that is adultery, death, and abuse. Those are kind of the three reasons that we would all agree that are okay to divorce. But what is abuse really? The question must be asked. This is the whole point of Faithful Doubt. There is no question that's really off limits here. So, is abuse really a reason for divorce? Is it a biblical reason for divorce? As I said, you should definitely get yourself out of that situation. But as far as divorce, many Bible scholars say that the logic of what Jesus is saying may allow for a divorce when a spouse has committed abuse or adultery. Because if we really understand the reasoning why this concession exists, it ultimately comes down to this. Is the covenant of marriage dead with you and your spouse? Well, what's a covenant, Jordan? That's a good question. Marriage is not a normal relationship. We have what's called consumer or contractual relationships, and then we have relationships that exist within a covenant, a covenantal relationship. What's the difference there? I have consumer and contractual relationships with just about any business I do, with the grocery store I go to, with the gas station, whatever it is, with all my subscription services to Netflix, Hulu. Those are all contractual consumer relationships. And if I feel that I'm not receiving what I'm giving, if I'm not receiving the value of what I've been giving, then I can break that contract at any time. We have those relationships in everyday life. A covenant relationship is not that kind of relationship. It says whatever the other party does not affect my part of the relationship. So if I believe that the other party in the relationship is doing something I don't like, if they are unfaithful, I am still supposed to remain faithful. I can't just break off that relationship because I don't like what's happening. That's a covenant relationship. It's more serious, it's deeper, and a good example is if you have kids, like you don't just say, all right, I don't really think this is working out. I'm going to have to let you go and go find a new kid. Like obviously that's just a joke. Like that doesn't even make sense. We don't just give up our kids because we don't like how they're acting, or maybe they've changed in some way. Like they're our children. I'm going to love them no matter what. That is how a marriage is supposed to be. It is a covenant relationship. Two parties have committed their vows and their lives to one another, and they say, in sickness and in health, for better, for worse, if you change, if I don't change, whatever happens, I'm going to remain in this relationship with you until the day I die. That is a covenantal relationship. And so what is the purpose of marriage? Why did God design that kind of relationship to begin with? Well, God gives us the gift of marriage so that we can actually be closer to him and we can know him more and be more like Jesus. And he gives us this beautiful relationship so that we can become one person with someone else. And that reflects the relationship God has with Christ the Son and the Holy Spirit. He's three persons in one. He exists as three persons, but in one being. And in my marriage, we are two persons in one flesh, right? We become one flesh through the act of marriage and sex, and so we have become one person. And so that is a gift from God for us to know him better, to be like him, to understand our relationship with him. And so marriage was never designed to give you complete fulfillment and happiness. It was never designed to fix you. But too often what happens in marriage is we look for the right person, right? Our soulmate, the person that's going to bring me everlasting happiness and fix me as a person. Or I'm going to fix them, whatever that looks like. And what ends up inevitably happening is we realize there is no perfect person for us. There is no right person for us because we are all sinful, we are all broken, and we are all the wrong person for each other. We all need one right person for us, and that's Jesus. It is not my spouse. And so this relationship is not designed to fulfill every need I have. And so when we encounter conflict and brokenness in marriage, the first response should not be, I want a divorce. As a doctor, just as a doctor doesn't amputate an arm or a leg because they find something wrong with the arm and the leg, or there's conflict or pain or brokenness in the arm or leg, that's not the first go-to procedure, right? The doctor does everything they can to save the limb, or amputation is a last resort. In the same way, divorce is kind of a last resort, and it only is permissible when the covenant of marriage is dead. And the covenant of marriage can only be killed by death or sexual immorality or unfaithfulness. And so you can make the argument that abuse is killing the covenant of marriage. And certainly committing adultery and sexual immorality kills the marriage. And so is divorce allowed in the Bible? Yes, the Bible allows for divorce, but only when the covenant has been killed or destroyed by adultery or sexual immorality. And ultimately, what we need to realize is we have all destroyed our covenant with God through adultery and immorality. Sin has destroyed our covenant with God. Our relationship with him is broken and it has been killed, and we have been separated from him because of sin. But God remains faithful in the relationship even though we aren't. And he has made a way for our relationship to be restored with him, and that is through the person of Jesus, through his life and his death and his resurrection. Divorce is so difficult to talk about, and we need to remember to be so compassionate, so loving when someone is going through that, as I'm sure some people watching this are going through it or have been through it. And so just know this, that because of divorce, that doesn't mean you aren't loved by God. It doesn't mean that it's an unforgivable sin. You are certainly loved by God, and any sin has been forgiven by Jesus' death on the cross and his resurrection from death into life. So this has been a very difficult question to go through with you guys today, but I love going through difficult questions because this is what Faithful Doubt is all about. Asking those difficult questions that keep us from God or even knowing him. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you guys next time. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you'd like to see more, you can go over to our Facebook page and request to join there, or you can watch any of our episodes on YouTube, or you can check us out on Instagram and TikTok now. Or if you just like the audio and you'd like to listen, you can find us on any of your favorite podcast platforms. I'll see you guys next time.